Welcome to ECTV Live. I'm Rusty Fender. Thank you so much for joining us. David DeCosmo knows the weeks to take off. He's vacationing in the Sunshine State, Florida. I'll be in the Sunshine State later in June, so it looks like we're all making the trek south of the Mason-Dixon line, but hope you're having a wonderful vacation on this, what looks to be a kind of moderate to cool week up here in the Northeast. David, joining us, of course, recurring guest, always for April, which is the month of distracted drivers, is Eileen Wolkers-Miller. Eileen, good to see you as always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Good to be here. Eileen, you have an 8-year story in the running, and why don't you recant this tragic story again? But again, out of everything bad, there seems to be a plethora of great inroads. At least maybe they may be one-lane roads, not a super highway, but at least we're making some progress on the deal. So give us the story, Eileen.
Well, my story is, I think everybody should know by now, it's a tough one, it's a rough one, but it's a story about my son Paul, who was killed by a semi-truck driver who was distracted. And
you know who the reporter was on the air who broke that story? Right here. That morning on Route 33 in the Poconos between Allentown East and Bethlehem and the Stroudsburg cutoff. And of course, who would know we would get together a decade later on this. But I remember that crash so vividly in the morning because it was closed for such a long time. Tractor trailer versus car fatality in the medium, a crossover deal. So both lanes of 33 north and south were shut down. What a tragic story that was, Eileen.
Yeah, heart-wrenching. You know, on July 4th, first of all, my son was a wonderful, fun-loving kid. He was in criminal justice, did 2 years at Lackawanna, hence 2 years went to East Stroudsburg, and that day would have been his last day at East Stroudsburg University, and then the following week was going to start an internship right here at Lackawanna. But on July 4th, he worked at Garrity's. He worked 2 full-time jobs and was going to school. And worked at Garrity's, walked out the door at 3 o'clock and said, "Mom, I'm going to a party, going to go visit with friends at East Stroudsburg University, and I'll be home tonight." Like he always did, kissed and hugged me, told me he loved me, and walked out the door, and never knew that would be the last time I would ever see him alive. And he went down and he told us he was going to East Stroudsburg. We didn't find out till later, but the party was all the way down in Bethlehem. So he had gone down there, he had called, I didn't know this till way after he had passed, but he did call around 6 o'clock. We were at a party the night before with friends. I missed that call. Paul, even back then, never left voicemails or that. He liked to talk to people. So he didn't leave a message. He had called back later at 10 o'clock. I didn't realize again until after he had passed away. I had missed that phone call. I was in the shower. He had called his friend and said, "Hey, I can't get in touch with my mom. Tell her I'm staying overnight." Again, he'd made all the right choices. He had a few beers, but more than anything, he was lost. He didn't know where he was. It was dark. He wanted to stay overnight. He made all the right choices. And again, so he stayed overnight. The next morning, he had woken up. He had called Garrity's and said, "Hey, I'm all the way down to Bethlehem. You know, I stayed overnight. I don't know where I am. I'm on my way back. I'm going to be late for work." And they said, "Paul, take your time. It's July 5th. There's nobody here at the store. When you get home, go home, take a shower. When you get here, you get here. Don't worry about it." So when he didn't arrive, they weren't concerned about him not showing up late because they told him to take his time. So he was on his way back. He was going north. The tractor trailer was coming south. For miles, people had saw him back on 80 off the road, on the road, lane switching, speeding. He was going 69 in a 45-mile work zone. He had crossed over that center line, and there was a van behind Paul with 12 passengers in it, and that had crashed into the tractor trailer. And it was about 11:45 at our house, and we were having a party at our house. And at that point, I was waiting on the porch for people to start arriving, and right out of a horror film, you know, 2 state troopers had pulled up to my home and asked me, you know, if anybody,
like you
if
see
my
in
husband.
The movies.
I knew. You know, unfortunately at that time too, my brother was in a horrible, he was at the burn center. My brother was in a horrible accident, and he was down at Lehigh Valley Burn Center. And it was funny because that morning, I shouldn't say funny by no means, but people were calling me asking me, you know, was the party still on? And I kept telling them I had a feeling, a bad pit in my stomach that morning, and I was throwing up. And I told them I had a feeling something was wrong with my brother Leo. It might not be, you know, might not be going on. I didn't know, but here all along it was my son. So when they had pulled up, you know, they asked me if I was home alone. I said, no, my husband's here. But in my brain, I kept seeing pictures of my son when he was 2, when he was 4, when he was 6, and I just knew. But there was, I guess what they had done is they had pulled up, the car was registered under my husband. So they pulled up my husband's picture and they knew it was not my husband. So they had pulled up my son. But I did not know at that time that we were not told by them, because what they did was they had contacted the state police up in Dunmore, and those state troopers had come to my house. So
I always
they were
wondered
not
the
actually
chronology of how that works when they get the call, and it takes a while.
Right. So I guess they never told me this at the time, and this is another thing I will get back to later, is they had a hard time, you know, what was your son be doing down in Stroudsburg, Route 33? And we're like, where's Route 33? We were never down there. So I guess they had pulled up his license plate. But then there was a little, they were pretty sure it was him because we told them nobody would be driving that vehicle other than my son. And they said, you know, East Stroudsburg is kind of close to Route 33. We didn't realize that he did not come home because he was just so responsible. He'd get up and go to work, you know. And so we were given identifying marks. We were saying he had tattoos. I guess, meanwhile, to say I'm screaming on my knees and I'm like, not my son, not my son. Everything was kind of a blur after that. But, you know, we were giving him tattoo marks. He had a big Celtic cross, chest and face. They're saying that he doesn't have it. We didn't realize till later that his body came out and was dragged all the way down the highway. So I'm telling them I want to go down and see him. You know, the hospital's saying he's a criminal case. You can't clean him up. You know, so I'm telling them no matter what, I'm going down to the morgue to see him. But he didn't come home. Where is he? You know, in your brain, all of this stuff is going on. So it wound up, you know, I did have to go down and identify him. At the hospital, they're saying he doesn't have any tattoo marks. We didn't realize, you know, what had actually happened. But when I went down there, I did go in the morgue and I did identify him, and I just couldn't believe that that was my child. The impact from the crash, he, as you clearly see, he drove right up over the hood of my son's vehicle and he rode right over my son's body. And then my son was dragged down the highway, and then it went into an embankment. And, you know, I just made my choice when I saw my son at that morgue. I said to her, I can't tell that that's him. I literally have to unzip the body bag to make sure that that's my son. And
you know, I think the ultimate is, this may be the masterpiece of understatement, but there's so much drama in death. It's his last day at college. It's like the captain of the Titanic on his last voyage after 47 years of sailing.
Yeah.
And the unthinkable happens in all cases. There's so much drama in such a tragedy like that.
And, you know, the thing of it is he did everything right. You know, it's not that he was drunk. You know, he stayed overnight.
You got to watch out for the other guy, and you couldn't have watched out for the other guy. Now the truck driver, he did not escape this unscathed.
No.
He did jail time.
Yeah, and that was
and
the hard part.
Texting.
No, actually, it was his statements, and this is the whole thing of what everything was. You know, I thought the justice system would have worked. That wasn't going to happen. I had to fight for that. He was never going to be charged. You know, he was going 69 in a 45-mile work zone. If I didn't go down there and constantly nag the district attorney's office, no charges were pending. The statute of limitations was running out, I'm like, I wouldn't care. But I found out after he had killed my son, he got 2 other traffic violations. So he was going to continually keep doing this.
This was a serial traffic violator.
Right. So I went down there, but it was his statements when we went through our civil case that he had to ping his one phone to reach for his other phone that was jammed up underneath his seat, and that's when I realized he was distracted. He wasn't even looking at the wheel. He's the CDL licensed driver. That should have been his one and only main task. And But I will say he did, and I had a terrific judge who knew that and told him that, and I knew that he was going to hurt other people. I needed him to learn a lesson and not to do that. But I will tell you that I did meet him through the Victims Dialogue program afterwards, and he did tell me that he was distracted. He did not come out of this unscathed. When I met him, he was not the same man. He never apologized to us. He never said he was sorry.
He didn't.
I know now you cannot go through what happened. 12 other people were injured that day. It was not just my son. My son, unfortunately, will never come back. You know, I'll never have children from him. My daughter now just has a beautiful little girl, and with all that joy, it saddens me that, you know, she'll never get to meet her uncle. You know, my husband, a year later, was diagnosed with ALS from the
Lou Gehrig's disease,
right,
yeah.
which is a horrible, horrible.
It's a debilitating,
you know,
absolutely.
And there's no doubt that the stress and anxiety from my son's death triggered it.
Absolutely.
You know, we can't prove it, but I slowly watched it unfold, and we just couldn't understand how the justice system failed us, and how somebody could just never say they're sorry. That could have went a long way. He took our case all the way to the Supreme Court, saying, you know, it wasn't his fault. It's not like he was out in the woods and somebody shot him and we didn't know who killed Paul. He was the only one. Kept going to appeals and appeals, and that takes a lot out of a family.
Did not take responsibility for his own actions on a deal like that, yeah.
Yeah. And but at this point, I could say it was just actually 5 years last week that we were in court. But now sitting here today, 5 years that we were in court, I know that he is not the same man. I know that he is sorry now. If we could have changed things, we would have. The hard part for me now is to get the laws changed, to get people to realize that when they are behind the wheel, that this should be turned off. You know, we need a cure for ALS. For this, we just need to turn our technology off when we're behind the wheel.
And you know, television has done a lot. Every other public service ad is for either buzz driving, drunk driving, the same thing.
Right.
You know, texting can wait. We talked about on the last show when I was up in Connecticut. You know, they have pull-off zones.
Right.
Your
New
cell
York,
call
New
can
Jersey,
wait. New York and New Jersey. Your
Connecticut,
cell phone call can wait. We have a pull-off zone like you do for like a little rest area to use a cell zone. So things have been put in place.
Right. Right.
And handheld now, all tractor-trailer drivers, Bluetooth.
Right.
No handheld.
They still do it.
They still do it. You
but they're
keep
not
it on your
supposed
lap.
to.
You see people at the stop sign looking down because you know that they're texting on their lap.
Correct.
And with the technology, as we spoke off the air, technology is always going to take the leadership
it will,
in a deal like this. And that's the sad part about that.
Sad part about it, it is. We do have a bill now. Rosemary Brown, Representative Rosemary Brown, has a handheld bill. It's 1684, and again, I'm out there lobbying. I really think that it's going to go through. I'm praying. I mean, I'm doing this for how many years now? We have a really great chance. I think it's time for Pennsylvania to step up. I'm really hopeful for it. I always tell everybody, I say to everybody, turn it off. I'm living this nightmare. I'm living this horrible, you know, I miss my son every day. You know, I see my husband going through a horrible disease. It's the after effects. People don't realize the after effects of it. I'm living it every day. You don't want to kill yourself or kill somebody else because of this, you know. And even now, our car manufacturers, they're all putting it behind the wheel. You know, they're all putting on the Infomat, you know, on the dashboard where you can, you know, do it from behind the wheel.
Now you have DVD players. Not only bad enough in the back of a van for the passengers, now you have them where the driver and the passenger can watch the same movie.
Right.
You know, when I started driving, when I took my driver's test back in 1973 at the Dunmore Barracks, like, you know, you couldn't even drink a soft drink. You couldn't hold a cup in your hand. I mean, and you're going to watch a 2-hour movie while you're driving. It's truly, it's really like one step forward and 7 back in some ways.
It's insane. You know, and I see this, you know, technology. My husband's going to need it as he's getting sicker.
I know.
But
and thank heavens for that technology.
For that technology, just not behind the wheel of a vehicle. You know, your one and only task is to get to point A to point B and get there safely. And it's not to have all this technology behind the vehicle.
Where did you start? What was the first step you took in this? Because you've come a long way, you've made inroads. PennDOT has been good.
PennDOT has been great with me. I mean, I have safety. They partnered. Well, Paul was killed in a work zone.
I know.
He was killed in a work zone.
PennDOT is huge, and Lord knows I know. PennDOT is a huge organization.
Yeah.
I work for PennDOT. You don't even know where to call in some of these districts. It's so vast.
They have been phenomenal for me.
Hundreds of thousands of employees. Where do you start? And they've been great.
They've been
phenomenal.
phenomenal.
Where do you start with something like that?
Well, I'll tell you, when I was in the morgue, I just whispered in my son's ear that, when I found out what it was, that I would spend the rest of my life doing whatever it took to make the road safe, that he should have not died that way, and I would not let him die in vain.
Wonderful final promise.
And I whispered in his ear that day that that's what I would do. And nobody should ever have to view their child like that they are so broken, and it was like every bone in his body was broken. And that's no way that you should ever have to view your child.
Right.
And I knew that at that point I really didn't know much about what had happened to him. I didn't know anything. I didn't even know at that point that he was dragged out of that vehicle. I actually knew because the only reason I knew was that people that day started calling me. It wasn't the news stations. They were showing his car from afar, but somebody had actually inboxed me and said, Mrs. Miller, his crash is on. It was another website, and I later found out that it was a towing company that took more pictures, just as many pictures, if not as the state police.
Yeah, because the television, of course, radio can't report that till the
they
next
were put
of
back,
kin is.
Right. And then I later had found out, because I had gotten, at that point, I wanted to know every single thing that happened to my son. People don't want to know. I wanted to know everything and anything.
There's a lot of information compiled in the police report too, probably, right? Like they could estimate from the speed and all that.
That's when they knew.
At least you had a little bit of the technical data available
I'm a mom
to you later.
who, unfortunately, I need to know everything, and that's what I did. I got every single bit of information. I probably did more investigating, probably than
the state police.
Than the state police
absolutely.
Of everybody, of everything. When the road was closed, believe me, I know more about that than probably anything else.
Have you been to the site? Have you been to the scene?
I've been to the site several times, but he's not there.
Because I would want to know. I would go. People say, we never want to see this again. I would go.
Forever, I was finding, his headlight. He had golf balls in there. Every time I go.
Pieces of.
And then finally I got to the point where he's not there. He's at peace, and I know he's okay, and he guides me on things what to say. I know people might think that's a little crazy, but he does.
Oh, no.
But finally one day I said, I don't need to come here.
Yeah.
He's not here anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, give me a reason not to come, and I wound up getting poison ivy there.
See that?
So I said, that's my sign not to come here anymore.
But at least that's a sign of closure. I would want to see the last
It's a very
spot
dangerous,
It is.
It's a very dangerous.
I know the curve. It's downhill and it's on a curve. So you have strike one and strike two against you right there.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and also my brother made a beautiful cross, but I have it way set back in the woods, and people said, where is it? And I said, if anybody's going to even think about looking at it, I'll take the cross down. I don't want anybody to see it. It's way back into the woods, because it's a terrible intersection, and I don't want people to be distracted looking at that. And you can't. I mean, you cannot.
Good point.
It's a terrible spot. And at the time, they were putting rails in at the time.
Yes.
That's why it was under construction.
They're doing that now all in the
I was
center median
working.
rails.
I joined the Safe 80 Task Force right away, because what was happening is they were doing, the Poconos were doing actually a campaign to do the Stay Alive, Drive Alive to Stay Alive. So right away I joined up with that, and right away I joined the Safe 80 Task Force. Hence, that's where I met up with Rosemary Round, Mario Scavello, and like right away I became very active. I started joining everything and anything I could. PennDOT's on. I joined Kathy Fox, who was on the highway safety here, and I just started joining everything that I could to get awareness. And then I started national, and I started just meeting other families who lost loved ones, and before I knew it, I was out there doing everything that I could.
You have come a long way, and a lot of inroads have been changed. What is the next step now?
To get this law in Pennsylvania
What do you think
done.
your chances are to get this through? I know it takes a long time. And do you think with the governor, the new gubernatorial race, do you think that this will have an impact if you have an incumbent in there, if you have somebody new, do you think it's going to be tougher to get your message across to an entirely new organization that comes into Harrisburg?
I'm not worried too much about all that. I'm worried right now. I think the hands-free bill right now, I think because every other state surrounding us right now has it.
Most everybody has it.
It's time for Pennsylvania.
I think you're right.
It's time for Pennsylvania. I'm really confident in all the years that I've been really pushing this, because Marcus X bill went dead, Tepeles's bill went dead. They all have gone dead. I think right now, because all our other states right now,
That's right.
all the other bills are going through, and every other state surrounding us, they all come into Pennsylvania. What's the first thing they do? They all pick up their phone and they go into it.
Right.
I always say, turn it off. Everybody always says to me, Mrs. Miller, what's the best app for me? And I said, see this button right here? That's the off button. To me, there's no text, phone call, snapshot, selfie, nothing that's worth a life. To me, I know I have to say it because I have to be in the real world. And in the real world, I know everybody's not going to turn it off. So that handheld in your brain, I don't want one person to think for 1 second that hands-free is not risk-free, because it is. It is risk-free. But in the realistic world, the handheld is definitely, it will save lives, because I believe in 100% in my son's case that he was reaching for that phone. If that was a bill back then, that maybe my son would have not passed away that day.
And it's really good that the surrounding states, that they have been on the bandwagon for years ago. Connecticut, I go back to Connecticut because I traveled up that way for many years. But you couldn't have radar detectors, or they would confiscate it, plus a ticket. I mean, they would literally keep it, plus now the texting areas and all that. Connecticut, a very, very proactive, pro-aggressive, safe driving state.
Yes.
So that certainly helps.
Right. And again, last year we were going to my sister-in-law's in New Jersey, and we were on 80 again, almost in the same exact spot before Route 33, and we got rear-ended again. And the van that we had just gotten for my husband, because he's handicapped, and sure enough, he pushed me at least a car and a half length. And
that's unbelievable.
And it hit. We were taken in the ambulance.
Well, that's the start of the congestion. That's the Bartonsville exit, and that's the start of all the congestion.
It was Pocono. There was the raceway. So we were we were going right. So we were going stopped for miles, for 3 or 4 miles, and sure enough. I look up and I could see the exit, and I look in the mirror, and our radiator is all smoking, and my husband got hurt, I got hurt, we were both taken in the ambulance, but I got out. As soon as I looked in my mirror, here's the guy had his cell phone up to his. So I said to the state trooper, I got out and I said to the guy behind me, buddy, you're following me for miles. I said, you were distracted. He said, no, I was just traveling from Ohio. I just wasn't paying attention to the road. And I said, buddy, that's your one and only task. Come on.
That's kind of
I was like, buddy. So I told the state trooper when he came, I said, he was on his phone. And he said, unless he admits to it, there's nothing I could do.
I know.
And I said, I know, my son was killed. And he looked at me, he's like, Mrs. Miller? And I'm like, yeah. And of course he knew who I was. So he said to me, unless he admits to it, there's nothing I can do. I said, in 2010, when my son was killed, he's not in the FARS report. Because unless they don't go back and change them, we didn't realize he was distracted till after, because they never subpoenaed his records. They never looked at distracted.
A ghost law. The law is on the books for the sake of keeping all the squeaky wheels like yourself quiet.
Right.
But does it help?
But in this case, when we were hurt, he came into the hospital. He said, Mrs. Miller, he did admit he was distracted.
How about that?
So I said to my husband,
so that's what, a citation?
So he,
yeah, it's a citation,
but it's on the statistics number.
Yeah,
so it's on the statistics number.
Yep.
So I said to my husband, in 2010, when our child got killed, he's not even listed as a distracted driving fatality in 2010. But now, this year, we get in a crash, and it's not at least on the numbers. So I said, I feel like it's a crawl, but he finally admitted that he was on his phone. So I said to my husband, I feel like it's a snail's pace crawl. Before I die, I hope that we have some headway. I hope we're at least close to, the DUIs, because everybody's not out on the road driving drunk every day, but everybody in a vehicle has a cell phone in their car.
I agree.
So we're worse, and the numbers keep climbing, and they're getting worse. You see more pedestrians being hit, more killed. The numbers are up, the numbers are higher. This is a terrible, terrible, terrible epidemic, because everybody is addicted to their cell phones.
Can you see in the future, it looks promising anyway, that for the most part, the folks that you deal with, the folks that you unveil yourself to, at least are receptive some of these laws, correct? These new laws.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
It's
I
tough for
hope so.
one person can't change the world.
Like I said,
know?
whether I'm speaking to 1,700 kids at a school, or I'm out speaking at a cell phone, at a company
or you're
trying to
speaking
get
to a
them,
state representative. Absolutely.
we need education, we need law enforcement, and we need, the legislation. We need education. We need all those things combined together to work together to get it done. I see it. The technology is just crazy. It's getting worse and worse, and technology is going to beat us.
It is.
And we have, now the car, the
Self-driving.
Google car. And we had our first
Just
fatality.
this morning, Federal Express ordered 17 self-driving Teslas for their tractor trailers.
Please don't kill me.
Tractor trailers now that are self-driving. It's like,
Right.
I'm
Well, they've been
all for
out for a
technology,
while.
being an engineer for the last 50 years. It's like self-driving
They've
tractor
been out
trailers.
for a while.
I know they have.
Budweiser had set a fleet out.
Anheuser-Busch was one of the first. That's right. That's right.
Right. So, I mean, they're out there, and pretty soon you're going to see vehicles driving now with nobody in them. The thing of it is even the ones that have been out there, the Teslas and that, whenever you Google, you'll see people in there playing chess, slapping their, that's not what they were made for. They were made for you to be engaged in driving, and that is your backup. People just, listen, 94% of crashes are because of driver behavior. That's people not doing the right thing, which is, whenever I'm out, I use the word pass. That's no phone, no alcohol, anything addictive, not wearing your seatbelt, and speeding. If everybody did that every time they got into their vehicle, they did those right things, they would make it home alive. They have to make sure that they're engaged in driving to get to point A to point B and to do it there safely.
Well, as we said, April is Distracted Driving Month once again, Driving Awareness Month.
Right.
And Eileen, good luck with your quest. We've been with you every step of the way here, and we'll continue on, as a matter of fact. And
I appreciate it.
We're glad you're going to get the word out once again. And just, you really do have to walk before you can run. And every step, I think, is a positive step.
They're baby steps. It's a crawl, but it's not an easy task. I knew that when my son died, that it was going to be a hard task. Legislation was going to be hard, but education, getting out there speaking, and having our police enforce it. And I believe this will be an enforceable law, is not having that cell phone in their hand, and I think it's going to help the police be able to enforce it. So I hope it gets out there, and I hope everybody just remembers to stay off their phone in memory of my son and all the thousands killed to distracted driving.
Good luck, Eileen. We're with you all the way. Eileen Wolkers-Miller, of course, April, Distracted Drivers Month. We thank you for watching. Mark McGlory, our technical guru, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank
you, Mark. And Dave DeCosmo hopefully will be back from his vacation in the Sunshine State next week. Until then, Rusty Fender saying thank you for watching. We'll see you next week right here on ECTV Live.